Welcome to Life Stories, where the simplest question can shatter a decade of silence. What would you do if a teenage girl walked up to your table at a five-star restaurant holding a baby and whispered, "Can I have your leftovers?" It sounds like the beginning of a scandal or a social experiment, but for one man, it was the moment his frozen heart began to beat again. What followed wasn't a rescue. It wasn't charity. It was something deeper, messier, and far more human. This is a story about grief that refuses to die, love that shows up in unexpected forms, and the quiet, stubborn ways we find our way back to being alive. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. Stay with us, because by the time you reach the end, you might just start to believe in second chances again. Now let's begin. The chandeliers in the Vesper glittered like frozen constellations, casting constellations of light over fine crystal and whispered conversations. The restaurant was a cathedral of silence and wealth, where deals were made over dry-aged steaks and heartbreak was swallowed with Bordeaux. But in the farthest corner of the room, seated alone behind an artful bouquet of white orchids and shadows, sat a man who had once commanded the world and now barely noticed it breathing. Ryan Whitmore, 49, tech mogul, widower, the kind of billionaire who graced Forbes covers and disappeared from them just as easily. His slate gray suit fit like a second skin, and the Patek Philippe on his wrist glimmered each time he raised his glass. But the man inside the armor was hollow. The filet mignon in front of him remained untouched. He wasn't hungry. He hadn't been for 10 years, not since Lillian and Caleb disappeared in a tangle of twisted metal and sirens that came too late. Around him, the Vesper hummed softly, insulated from the real world, but Ryan heard nothing, saw nothing, until a voice, quiet, trembling, cut through the velvet hush. "Can I have your leftovers, sir?" He looked up, startled, and for a moment he thought he was hallucinating. The girl standing beside his table couldn't have been older than 19. Her coat hung off her shoulders, more thread than fabric. Her blonde hair was messily pinned back, pieces falling over a pale face that hadn't slept in days. But her arms were full, with a baby, maybe 8 months old, wrapped in a faded blanket, wide eyes locked on Ryan's plate. Waiters began to move toward her, concern and disapproval, already drawing lines on their faces. But Ryan raised one hand, silencing them. She wasn't stealing. She wasn't begging. She was surviving. She didn't flinch. She didn't plead. And that unnerved him more than any desperate sob ever could. Her eyes didn't hold shame. They held something far more dangerous, conviction. Ryan studied her. The way she shielded the baby instinctively from the cold air, the wear in her shoes, the quiet fire beneath her exhaustion. His throat closed around something he hadn't felt in years, a memory, maybe, or something more primitive. He pushed the plate toward her. "Take it," he said, his voice almost unfamiliar to his own ears. But she didn't dive for it. She didn't act like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Instead, she reached into a worn shoulder bag and pulled out a clean cloth. Gently, she wrapped the food like it was gold. Then she knelt on one knee, cradled the baby, and produced a plastic spoon. She blew softly on the potatoes and fed him, slowly, carefully. The baby cooed. A sound so pure, so delighted, it scraped something raw inside Ryan's chest. He hadn't heard that sound since Caleb, not once. And for the first time in a decade, he looked away from his glass, not to avoid the past, but because it was suddenly unbearable to stay numb. The girl said nothing. When the baby finished, she stood, nodded, not in gratitude, but in recognition, and turned to leave. Ryan didn't move, couldn't, until something in him snapped free. He left a $100,000 dinner behind, followed her out the heavy doors and into the cold New York night. He kept his distance, his expensive shoes silent against the sidewalk as she disappeared into an alley, then a crumbling parking lot. She walked straight to a dented Navy sedan, no plates, no hubcaps, just fogged windows and a prayer. She settled into the back seat with the baby like it was a cradle. Then she began to sing. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." The words hung in the air like incense. Ryan stood frozen, half shrouded in streetlight, half in shadow. When she saw him, she didn't scream, just looked, measured him. The billionaire and the girl with a baby in a broken car, staring at each other across the wreckage of two very different lives. "I'm sorry," he said, hands up. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. She hesitated. You followed me. He nodded. Yeah. Her name was Ava. The baby was Liam. And that night, something changed. Not with fireworks. Not with promises, but with presence. She didn't ask for money. She asked for one day where her son could be safe. That was it. And Ryan, who had spent years building empires just to avoid his own heartbeat, found himself doing what he hadn't done in 10 years. He gave a damn. But the world didn't wait for permission. 3 days later, Ava's photo was everywhere. Someone had snapped a blurry image of Ryan cradling Liam outside the emergency room after a fever scare. Billionaire's midnight rescue of teen mom lit up every gossip feed. Ava's name leaked, her past dredged up, her motives questioned, gold digger, scam artist, opportunist, and Ryan, who had always known how to control a narrative, sat silently as the media tore apart the one person who had reminded him what it meant to feel. Ava stopped answering his calls. She didn't want her son growing up in the shadow of public humiliation. She said she wouldn't let strangers decide his worth based on tabloid venom. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Ryan had a secret, one that could destroy everything or heal it. Because Ava Monroe wasn't a stranger. Ryan had seen her once before, not in a restaurant, not on a sidewalk, but in a photo. A photo Lillian had kept folded in her wallet. A photo of a foster kid she once tutored, a little girl with fire in her eyes and bruises on her arms. A girl named Ava. And that truth, burning in Ryan's chest like a brand, was about to rewrite everything. What would you do if the person who saved your soul was the one you unknowingly left behind? Can a man haunted by the past rewrite his future without shattering someone else's again? Because when Ryan knocks on Ava's door again, this time, he's not just carrying answers, he's carrying a truth that could break them both. Ava stood at the window of the apartment Ryan had arranged for her and Liam, the late autumn light slanting through dusty blinds. Her phone buzzed again. Another news alert, another stranger dissecting her life like it was a scandal to solve. She deleted every social media app, but it didn't matter. The headlines were everywhere. From car to castle, who is Ava Monroe? Billionaire's mystery girl, what's she hiding? And the worst of all, the one she couldn't forget, even after deleting it. Billionaire widower falls for foster kid turned teen mom, a redemption romance or calculated move? She turned the screen over on the table and tried to breathe. Liam was napping in the next room, the rhythmic sound of his white noise machine the only calm in her storm. Her body still ached from the sleepless night at the ER, from holding him through fevered sobs and panic she couldn't name. But it wasn't the illness that haunted her now, it was the kindness. Ryan hadn't hesitated. He'd held Liam like he belonged to him. He'd walked into that ER like a man possessed. He'd saved her child. But it was the way he'd looked at her afterward that unsettled her most, as if he saw her, as if he knew her. When the knock came, she didn't move right away. She watched the door. Not because she was afraid, but because she was no longer sure which version of herself would answer it. The girl in the parking lot with a baby on her hip, or the woman now sitting in an apartment that didn't smell like mildew, where the heat came on at the turn of a knob. She opened the door. Ryan stood there, a folder in his hand and guilt in his eyes. "I need to tell you something," he said. No preamble, no smile, just 5 words that felt like a hinge creaking open. He didn't sit. He didn't ask permission. He just handed her the folder, and Ava took it with slow, cautious hands. Inside were a handful of photographs, aged, worn, their corners curled. She recognized one instantly. It had been taken at a foster group in Queens years ago. She was maybe 8, holding a battered paperback and scowling at the camera like she'd see the future already breaking. "My wife," Ryan said quietly, "Lillian, she used to volunteer at that center." She never mentioned names, but she kept this photo in her wallet for years. Said there was this one girl who reminded her what strength looked like. She always hoped she'd see her again. "I didn't recognize you at first, but that night in the Vesper, something about the way you looked at Liam, I remembered that photo." Ava's breath caught. Her hands trembled around the edge of the folder. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying Ryan said, voice steady, that you didn't come into my life out of nowhere. You were already in it. I just didn't know. The silence between them was no longer soft. It was knife-edged. Ava sat down slowly, her heart ricocheting between awe and suspicion. Did you know when you followed me to the car? No, not then. Not until later. After the ER, I was trying to understand why I couldn't stop thinking about you. I went through some of Lillian's old things, and I found the photo. Ava stared at the image again. That girl didn't look like someone anyone remembered. She looked feral, tired, like she was already learning how to survive without love. So what does this mean to you? She asked, her voice low, wary. Ryan looked at her like a man afraid to speak the wrong truth. It means, I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Maybe we were meant to cross paths again. Or maybe it's just one more coincidence in a world that doesn't believe in them. Ava closed the folder gently, her mind spinning. So am I a memory to you? Or something new? You're not a memory, he said. You're the first real thing that's happened to me in 10 years. But Ava didn't answer. She walked into Liam's room and stood at the edge of his crib. Her fingers traced the wooden rail. She had been 8 years old when someone, Lillian, had seen something in her worth holding on to. And then she'd been forgotten again. Dumped in another home, another couch. Another goodbye. She'd promised herself that Liam would never know that kind of uncertainty, that he'd always know who loved him, that love would never feel borrowed. Ryan stepped into the room behind her. You don't have to decide anything now. But Ava was already staring at a deeper truth. This wasn't chance, she whispered. You didn't just save us that night. You were trying to save a promise your wife made a long time ago. Ryan didn't deny it. He couldn't. Maybe, he said. But somewhere along the way, I wasn't just trying to fulfill her promise. I was trying to make my own. That's when Ava turned to him, eyes burning. Then make me one now. Promise me you'll never confuse saving me with loving me. I've been saved before. It never lasts. Ryan didn't blink. Then let me do something different, he said. Let me stay. Do you think Ryan's discovery connects them more deeply or only complicates their fragile trust? Because the next time the door knocks, it won't be Ryan, and the secret waiting behind it could burn everything to the ground. The knock came just after sunset. Not the sharp, decisive tap of someone impatient, but slow and deliberate, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they wanted to be there. Ava had just finished feeding Liam and was rocking him gently in her arms, his lashes fluttering like tired wings. Ryan was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, heating up soup he insisted on making from scratch now. The apartment smelled like thyme and something comforting. Life had begun to settle into a rhythm, fragile, but real, the kind you don't realize you're breathing until it's interrupted. Ava opened the door and felt her spine straighten at the sight of the woman standing there. Mid-50s, hair pulled into a tight bun, tailored blazer over a blouse too crisp for apology. Her eyes, though, betrayed her, unsteady, searching. I'm looking for Ava Monroe, the woman said. Her voice had an edge, not cruel, just afraid of what it might find. Ava didn't move. You found her. The woman's lips parted, then closed. She looked at Liam in Ava's arms like she wasn't ready for the proof of his existence. My name is Claire Whitmore, she said quietly. Lillian was my daughter. Behind her, Ryan froze. The spoon in his hand clinked against the edge of the pot. Claire looked past Ava, straight at him. You didn't tell her, she said, and her voice cracked like a hairline fracture in porcelain. Ava turned. Tell me what? Ryan walked to the doorway, slow and silent. The look in his eyes said everything before his mouth even moved. Lillian didn't just know you, he said. She filed a petition to adopt you. The papers were in process. They'd chosen you. Ava's knees nearly buckled. The air vanished from the hallway. Claire stepped forward, but the accident happened before the paperwork was finalized. After they died, I didn't know who you were. I only found out last week when I saw your picture. I recognized your eyes. Ava looked down at Liam. Her voice was raw. So you're saying I had a family once and no one told me? I didn't know how to find you, Claire said. I was grieving my daughter and you disappeared into the system again. I didn't try hard enough. That's my truth. But I've come now, Because if there's still a piece of Lillian in this world, I couldn't live without at least trying to know it. Ryan reached for Ava's shoulder. I wanted to tell you, but how do you tell someone they were almost loved? The words hit harder than betrayal. Almost loved, like a near miss with happiness. Ava didn't cry. She walked back into the apartment and laid Liam in his crib. He rolled toward her warmth, even in sleep, one chubby fist tucked beneath his cheek. She watched him for a moment, then turned back to the doorway. Why now? She asked Claire. Why come find me now? Because it's never too late to tell the truth, Claire said. Even if it's too late for everything else. There was silence again, but not emptiness. The kind of silence that asks something of you. That night, Ava didn't speak much. She sat on the balcony with Ryan, her legs pulled to her chest, the city stretched below like a map she no longer feared. I keep thinking, she whispered, what if I'd grown up knowing I was wanted? What kind of person would I have become? Ryan didn't answer right away. Then, you became her anyway. Strong, brave, soft where the world was hard. I think Lillian would have been proud and jealous that I got to be the one who found you. Ava leaned into him, not because she needed comfort, but because she didn't want to carry the moment alone. The next morning, Claire returned, not with demands, but with a photo album. Ava opened it at the kitchen table, while Liam gnawed on a teething ring beside her. Page after page, Lillian's handwriting danced along the margins. She called you the firefly, Claire said, because she said even in the dark, you glowed. The album was more than a memory. It was a roadmap of everything Ava had lost and never known she'd almost had. And when she reached the final page, she found a letter written in Lillian's elegant looping script. It wasn't addressed to her by name, but it didn't have to be. If we get to keep her, I promise I'll teach her how to stay soft, even when the world tells her to harden. I'll tell her that being chosen once doesn't mean she has to earn love every day. She'll just be ours. No conditions, no expiration date. Ava didn't cry in that moment. She cried that night, though, long after Liam was asleep, long after Ryan had kissed her temple and told her again that he wasn't going anywhere. A week later, she returned the favor. Ryan had just come home from a board meeting uncharacteristically early, the December wind still clinging to his coat. Ava met him at the door, barefoot in sweatpants, her hair a tangled halo. In her hand was a single envelope. I found something today, she said. Something I want you to read. Ryan opened it slowly. Inside was a drawing, crayon and marker chaos, of 3 stick figures under a giant yellow sun. One had a ponytail, one had silver hair. The third was small and smiling and had a crown made of scribbles. In Liam's messy handwriting it said, me, mama, daddy. Ryan stared at the picture for a long time before looking up. He called me that? He's been saying it for days, Ava said, eyes glistening. I just wanted to make sure it was okay with you. He reached for her then, not like a man reaching for something delicate, but like someone finally allowed to hold what they thought was forbidden. It's more than okay, he whispered. It's everything. They didn't get married that winter. There was no rush, no need for declarations. They were already choosing each other every day. Ava eventually met Claire again, not as a girl abandoned, but as a woman redefined. They walked together through Central Park, leaves crunching beneath their boots, Liam toddling between them, a bridge between what was and what might still be. And when Ava finally stood in front of the mirror one night, watching herself tuck Liam into bed in a home that smelled like soup and safety, she realized something. She had been loved all along. First, quietly, then fiercely, then freely, and now, fully. How did this story make you feel? Were there moments that stayed with you long after reading? If you loved this journey, comment 100 below. Tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to know. Share this video with a friend who believes in second chances. Thank you for watching Life Stories.